Hello, everybody. This is Debbie Eno from Teacher Success Coach with another episode of the Female Educators Roundtable. And today I've got my co-host with me, Alicia Scott. And on Saturday's show, we'll be looking at homeschooling. Is homeschooling more powerful than traditional school in preparing young people to navigate the real world? We are not telling you which is which. We are just going to be interviewing people who've actually done the homeschooling journey to find out what it was like for them. Also, where they're at in relationship to the homeschooling and whether or not for them it was the correct choice. Also, whether or not they feel that this homeschooling is preparing their children for the real world. As an educator, I also know and feel that the traditional education does not prepare our young people to navigate the real world. That's my perspective on that as an educator and a parent. So it is up to you to decide if you want to go into homeschooling with your children or child. And after the show, you might decide that it actually gives you a good idea as to what you want to do. So the Saturday show would be looking at homeschooling. As from next week, we'll be having guests on the show, but today, Alicia and I have decided to just give you guys an overview of homeschooling because Alicia is and was, I'm not too sure where she is with that homeschooler. She's actually an educator like myself, but she's jumped ship. She's left education, the traditional education, and she's doing a range of things. So Alicia, introduce yourself and tell Facebook audience what you do.
Evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Scott. I'm an educator. I'm also a parent, and I'm a homeschool advisor. As I'm a homeschooler myself, and as Debbie said, I used to be a teacher in the traditional classroom, but as of the pandemic, I left the classroom and I became a homeschooler, and I also started my own tuition business.
Yes, so here are the two educators. It doesn't matter if you used to be in the traditional education, but you're still an educator. I've always said to people, once an educator, we always an educator because we're always looking for things to educate our children, whether or not we're doing it as an advisor capacity or back into the classroom or, as a homeschooler, we are always finding resources that we could use as educators. Right, so today we'll be talking about why Alicia became a homeschooler. What do you feel about homeschooling, etc.? So we're just going to be I'll just be interviewing Alicia. She's my co-host, but today she would be on the hot seat, right? So I'll be interviewing her as to the reason she became a homeschooler and what the situation is in relationship to homeschooling. And next week we're going to have someone who is a homeschooler herself. Also, she provides various resources. So every week we'll have various homeschoolers who will be as I said earlier on, would be taking us on the journey as to the reason why they decide to remove their children from the traditional education and homeschool them themselves. Okay, Alicia, why did you decide to become a homeschooler?
Well, I was aware of homeschooling from prior to the pandemic, when we all became homeschoolers. And for me, the main reason was just how I saw how my daughter thrived by being educated by myself. Whereas before, she found it sometimes quite difficult to connect with school. But when we decided to put aside what was being sent home to do from the school, and I was like, you know what, let us think of it a different way. Now that we're having to be at home, do the learning from at home, and we sat down together. I learned my daughter's learning style. We just came up with what curriculum topics we're going to do together. And then she became more engaged in the learning and more connected with what we had to do each week. Whereas before, when it was topics that she had no interest in, had never heard of before. She just wasn't connecting, and it was a difficulty to try and get her to try and complete the work. But when I sat her down and I was like, you know what, let's look at this from a different angle and let's see if we can try and learn the topics, but in a different way. So I feel that in school that we sort of lose the love of learning as children get older. It seems to be we put children under more pressure to teach to the test. Whereas I feel that when you're home educating, you can try and more focus on your child, or even if you want to do it as a group of children, focus on what their individual needs are and then base the learning around their needs. So that's just like a multitude of reasons for why I just felt at the time that we should just continue home educating instead of me sending her back to the traditional classroom, because she was doing really well and it just made sense to continue what we've done from March 2020. And I know that some parents did find it quite difficult home educating, but I think it's because the angle they might have approached it. I think a lot of parents saw what the school had asked them to do and they were like, must do this X, Y, Z, I must get this done. And they were putting themselves and their poor child under pressure. But then there was probably some mornings where the child was trying to cope with the fact that I've gone from getting up in the morning, getting ready for school, to now mummy, daddy, guardian, whoever is now my teacher. And that is just a difficult concept for any child, doesn't matter what age, to grasp. You know, we had that, me and my daughter, but I had to navigate that with her. I had to tell her when I had mummy hat on, when I had teacher hat on, I think that helped so that she could differentiate between me from being mummy from then becoming teacher. And I feel that a lot of parents, that's where they did struggle, because they wasn't able to establish those boundaries with their children. So sometimes I guess the work wasn't connecting and their children chose not to connect with the work. So work wasn't getting completed. But if they had tried to look at it from a different angle, I think that would have helped to ease, especially if I know parents had it more difficult if you had, say, children of various ages, but you could have done like a timetable together. So that child A is working on this from a certain time, child B, then child C, for example, and then in the afternoon, A, B, and C child come together, complete an activity, a family activity. And that way, and you can also make sure that you were covering lots of subjects. So, for example, in the afternoon, they could have done cooking together as a family. With cooking, you're covering maths, creativity. You're also looking at science because, you know, mixing together. So there's so many, English, there's so many different subjects in just one activity that I think would have helped parents. I think if they had a little bit more guidance instead of trying to replicate the classroom, because that was never going to happen. That was never going to happen, especially if you had no experience. I think, okay, I did find it a little bit easier because I am an educator. But for some parents who this was new to them, I think because they tried to become the teacher, that's where they had difficulties, because they really thought that just because 7 pieces of work was sent home, if you really believe that your child was doing these 7 pieces of work every day, I'm sorry, more for you. I'm sorry, children do not complete that much work. Like I helped one friend out, and her child was getting stacks and stacks of work, and she was actually trying to get him to complete it every single day. And the times that I helped her out, I said to her, you do realize this isn't really, I said, this is probably a week's worth of work that you're trying to cram into a day. I said, so what? They said it has to be completed. I said, think about this poor child that you're sitting down, I said, to say, get all this done. I said, it's not possible. I said, it doesn't get done in the classroom. I said, you don't have to believe what the teacher says. I said, seriously, I know that this is not, all of this would not get covered in one day. I said, there's lots of times where myself as an educator, I've had to roll things over to the next day. Yes, that does annoy you. You're like, no, I've messed up. But sometimes you do need to roll over to the next day or even the next week, and you have to play what's called catch up. But obviously parents weren't aware of that. And they put so much pressure on themselves, which then impacted on their children. And we really should have just taken a step back, because we should have realized what the children, they was going through, well, they were living through a pandemic. None of us had experienced it before. We should have been focusing on nurturing the children instead of just thinking, get the work done, get the work done.
Yeah, I so agree with you on all of those things in terms of nurturing the children. Because during the pandemic, I was teacher, parent, teacher, right? Because I had to be parent teacher to my 15-year-old, and I'm also teacher on the platform. And we were expected to teach, like an hour and plus lesson. I said to my student, hey, no, sir. After every 20 minutes, we had a 5-minute break because some of my lessons was an hour and a half. Some of them were double lesson. And I said, there's no way we're going to be doing that. So after every 20 minutes, I said, I'm off the platform, get off the platform. We have a 5 minutes break and then we come back. We had another few minutes, after another 20 minutes, we had another 5 minutes and we come back. We did a range of things during the double lesson. Sometimes there was the dancing, the stretching. I'm not seeing them. Sorry, they're not, I'm not seeing the faces. I'm just hearing them and I'm just doing all my craziness, etc. But it was really good because they actually broke up the lesson. When they came back, they were more ready to study. I got more answers from them. So you're so right when you say in terms of parents had an unrealistic expectation, because I even went upstairs and said to my son, because I was downstairs on the platform with my students. So when I had a break with my student, I went upstairs and said to my son, get off the platform. He's saying to me, oh, but mom, Mrs. I said, I'm not interested. You get off, you take a 5 minutes break. I said, your teacher is there. She's not even seeing you because they don't even have the camera on. So they don't even know he's there. You know what I mean? That's the thing about it. So there was no point because the student, for my child's son, he had his camera off, his voice off. The teacher had her camera off. So the children could be gone and you don't know. So I said to him, there's no point. So then, he realized that after every 20 minutes, he started getting off and having a 5 minutes break because he also meant that they became more engaged. You are so right when you're saying about, the 7 pieces of work and that sometimes you have to roll over. Sometimes not next day, as you rightly say, sometime next week, because the next day you have a plan already. So it's interesting because, as you say, when you're actually homeschooling, you devise your own timetable. And homeschooling doesn't have to be like the traditional education. It doesn't have to be so prescriptive. Because what you're trying to do is foster the beauty of learning in your child by combating what the traditional education was doing. Because a lot of children did not connect with the traditional education. I know myself when I was doing my master's, I was sitting in the lesson and because I was teaching at the time, and I was planning my lesson in the women's class because she was so boring. And I don't even think she connected that she's lost some of her students because it was a big class, it was 17 of us. And those of us that were educators, we switched off because there was nothing new she was saying to us. She just came and talked at the PowerPoint at us. So I just sat there and I planned my lessons. So whereas if it was engaging, I'm not saying that all lessons have to be engaging, I'm saying, yeah, all lessons have to be engaging, but it doesn't have to be all dance up and all those situations. There are different ways of engagement because there's some days you might have a fantastic, fully engaged, exciting lesson, jumping up, etc., high energy. Another day you might have a lesson engaging, but the energy isn't that high. That doesn't mean that there is no engagement. They're different levels. So when we talk about homeschooling, people need to realize that it doesn't have to be prescriptive to the traditional education. And if we do have a lockdown, as I was advising some parents as well, that they do not have to be prescriptive. You could do cooking, as Alicia say, you could do a whole range of things and you cover a whole range of subjects because you're meant to be innovative and creative because, come on, parents, not all of you are educators. So you need to find a way to engage your children in the education. And my next question, what do you feel traditional school lack, Alicia?
I just feel that as you move through the years, as I mentioned earlier, like my specialism is in the early years, where creativity is encouraged and learning through play is encouraged. As children move up through the years, that's lost, and that really, really is heartbreaking, because I just feel that when you can learn through just actually doing, like kinesthetic learning, it opens up a world like for children and opportunities. So that's one of the areas that I do feel that traditional school lacks. Like, we don't take into consideration each of the different children's learning styles. We just automatically assume every child, one size fits all, and we assume that, yeah, every child learns in the same way, and that is not true. We don't have the time, or we don't take the time to actually assess each of the children. I know we've got 30 or maybe 30 plus in a class, but take that time to assess, what their different learning styles, and as best as you can, if you can group them, and then use resources that suit their learning style. Because that's one area that I feel that we lack in traditional school. Another is that we sort of lose that nurturing as well. We tend to focus so much on getting them ready for this exam, that exam, that we forget things like what I do with my daughters. We have brain breaks. So we learn for chunks of a time, 40 minutes, and then we have a 20-minute brain break where she has to move around, she has to get up, just do anything, but that's her 20 minutes, just so she's got time to recharge, and then we go again. But in school, there's no time for that. It's literally, they just go from lesson to lesson, they get their break, they get their lunch. But again, we sort of lose that sort of nurturing. I just feel that some teachers, they just focus so much on getting what has to be done throughout the day that you sort of forget that you've got a child in the corner or so, like, flagging or not engaged in the lesson. They're not going to take in anything. You need to think about, maybe, do we need a water break? Do I need a movement break? Do I need some sort of break just to make sure that, okay, might be just one child that's not engaged, but I want everyone to be part of the lesson. So, so that's another area that I do feel that traditional school lacks. Another aspect that I do find is that it's outdated. Like, we need to change. I've worked in schools where they still do what they did 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, I hear you. I hear you.
No, but it's really, I don't know why I'm laughing, but I think it's, when I've gone to schools, I said to them, okay, so what do you do? Let me see the plan. Okay, that's great. But just because you've always done this doesn't mean we have to stick to it. I was like, you do know that topics have changed, we should move with the times. But what I'm forever hearing in schools is, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it's always going to be done.
Yep.
Again, we do need to try and encourage more innovation and creativity in the classroom, because some schools, I just feel that's where we're lacking. And again, that's where you're going to lose some children. Because when I found out that children are still learning about the Vikings and the Romans, like when I was learning in school, I think that's pitiful, because I don't remember anything about that. The learning that I remember was the fun, creative lessons, the cooking lessons that I had. I remember the lessons where we did arts and crafts. I do not remember any lessons where I can't tell you anything about the Vikings and the Romans. I don't remember anything. So that's another area that I do feel that we need to work on in schools. We need to start looking at ensuring that when we have our planning meetings, team meetings, that we're making changes and we're considering how the world is changing.
Yeah.
We really should be doing things that we did when I was in school like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's actually pitiful. I go to schools and they're still, when I say, oh, where do I get the plans from? I'll just download it. And I'm like, huh? All that's being changed is the date here. That's all that's being changed. So that's one of my concerns, that at least with homeschooling, you can design your own curriculum with your child, and it shows that once your child is engaged with the learning, they are going to be so encouraged to complete it. They're going to feel proud when they've completed it. But in school, most of the time, children don't have any say in the topics. So they're just told what to learn. They have to learn it, try and regurgitate it for, say, a test or for SATs. And sometimes for some children, if it's not a topic they can connect with, or if you haven't done something that's going to help them remember, that information is lost. They might remember it on Monday, but by Friday, when their parent collects them, they can't tell their parent what they learned all week. And then you as a teacher, you've got to think, okay, where do we go from here?
It is so very, very true. I'm sitting here listening to you and revisiting the classroom in my mind. It's like when I go, because I do, what is it called? Supply work. It's a mixture of choice and a mixture of no choice. And I have really, I've really enjoyed it to an extent. And when I go to schools, one of the first things I say to these people, I am not a traditional educator. So if that's what you were expecting, I'm really sorry. I say I'm one of these educators who plays music in her class. The student dance, we all dance because the brain needs to be moving. We need to have the energy circulating in the brain. We also do things like jump around. We go outside. I teach outside. You know, I do a range of things. And I say, most of all, the brain cannot take in so much at a time. So therefore, after every 20 minutes, I have a break. Some schools are okay with it. Other schools, I do it anyway. In one of the schools I worked in January, you know, every minute somebody have to be telling me off. Because, you know, I send the student out of the class to get a little, you know, 5 minutes break. I was told they're not supposed to be leaving the classroom. I'm not supposed to be allowing them to go to the toilet. I'm not supposed to be allowing them for water break. And I had to say to them, well, sorry, if that's what the kind of teacher you expect, we can't work like this. Because if a student said they need water, I'm not going to say no. And after every 20 minutes, they need to have a break. And that's what people do not realize is the brain cannot take in more than 20 minutes. So you could have a student in your class for an hour and a half. And that is something I had to teach some educators. The first part of the lesson, the student remember. The last part of the lesson, the student remember. The middle part is a haze. So which means that you have an hour and a half lesson, you lose the students. Whereas if you have half, let's say you have 20 minutes break, you have at 20 minutes, you have a break, you start at 20 minutes, you have a break, you are catching so many pieces of learning than just having a whole long piece of learning with the same teacher. You're not even covering the contents. So that is what I so agree, Alicia, in terms of the traditional school, they're really lacking. Because after I've actually had a break with my students, it makes such a difference. Because when they go back to learn, I have my student again because we have so many breaks in the session, there's so many learning have taken place, and there's so many aspects of recall have taken place because it's the same teacher they're having. Whereas when you break, when you do so many different activities, there's so much learning taking place. And the penny haven't dropped in the education system. They seem to think that when you put a child to sit down in front of you for an hour and a half, a so-called double lesson, and you just teach it, the same teacher, that things are going in, nothing goes in.
No,
it's
so
really
true.
sad.
No, so true. Like I did notice a difference when I started introducing the brain breaks. I noticed a huge difference. Like my daughter, she knew that the breaks are coming, and they definitely helped her to be re-energized and ready to start again. It did make a difference. Instead of just going from lesson to lesson, then we had a break. That wasn't working for us. So then when I introduced 40-minute chunks of learning time, you know, you can cover so much. And again, with one of the joys of homeschooling is that you can, you know, continue over the next day. There's no pressure, or even into the evening. There's no pressure. There's no prescriptive time to get anything completed. Whereas in the school, you know, you've got that set day, you've got the hours, say 9 till 3, where you just feel like I've got to get X, Y, Z done. But you know, sometimes that's not always possible.
Nope. Well, for a teacher like me, it's not always possible. When it comes to content, Debbie's always behind in terms of content, because I feel it's so essential that I tap in with my student. Also in terms of we do chunk lesson, and it is so amazing because my student learns so much more when my lesson is chunk up in every 20 minutes. I tend to teach in a form of a homeschooling, because when you are able to connect learning with something that a child know and the child like and the child enjoy, so much more learning is taking place. So there's always a story I have to be telling them, or they're actually telling me a story, so we connect the learning. And one of the beautiful things of learning is if you connect it with themselves, they're able to learn a lot more. And I said to a group of students, I did a intervention session, and I said to my student, because I had them from 9:30 until 3. The first half of the session was doing mindset training with them, and also trying to show them how to learn. Because I'm saying to them, it doesn't matter what subject you're being taught, you need to put yourself in the subject. The more you put yourself in the subject, the more you are going to enjoy the subject. So when we're talking about, it's like homeschooling, as you say, Alicia, in terms of, you're talking about maths, and when you're cooking, you see maths in cooking. So those kind of setup, it's like putting yourself in the learning. So you're talking about history, and kind of see yourself in the history, in the minds of these people who you're learning about. Psychology, in the mind, psychology is not the study of human brain. No, it's the study of your brain, your behavior, your action. So put yourself in terms of that. When you're looking at sociology about society, yes, I hear you, but put yourself in the society. You're part of society. Politics, put yourself in terms of you are a voter. So it's like all these things, we need to connect with all those things. And when you start leaving them in isolation, you don't understand it, and it becomes boring.
No, so true.
When you talk about homeschooling, I'm not a homeschooler. Part of me would love to be homeschooler, but it's a bit late now because it's on child number 3, and child number 3 is so conditioned to the classroom that at 15, it's going to be a little bit challenging.
No, that's understandable. Very, very true.
Another thing is, we know that when children are in primary school grades, when children are in primary school, the grades are higher. This is statistically, also as educators, we see it ourselves, we know that. Because I would say that it's because of curiosity and they enjoy learning. But when they get to secondary school, that is completely lost. How can this be maintained as a homeschooler, Alicia?
Oh, that's quite a loaded question. I feel that when you're home educated and you do have that transition where your child, say, goes from year 6 then to year 7, I think you definitely have to do a lot of work around transitioning, and also preparing them for the fact that the work is going to get quite a bit more difficult. But also what you can try and consider, so that they still have that love of learning, is just see how you can maybe look at subjects but in deeper, have a deeper understanding of it. So for example, I'm just thinking, for example, if you had to do science experiments, yes, you can still use the science kits that you might have been using when they were at the primary level, but then you're going to have to take it that one step further, start to look at how a science experiment is completed, start to talk to them about how they've got to do predictions, then they've got to write up their results. I think just so that they're still getting that practical learning, and hopefully that will still help them to enjoy the learning that's taking place. But then that next level that you have to take when you do go to the secondary level is showing them that this is now a science experiment that we've conducted, we need to write it up, and it's not just a simple case of just completing it like how we would have done before. Now there's a next level that we have to go to. I think if you did try to do it in that way, that's one way that you could try to keep the love of learning going. But it is well known that children do seem to lose that love of learning, because I think it's just that big jump. But I think if you prepare them in enough time, that will definitely help. And if needs be, another idea is if you know that your child, for example, maths they find difficult, and then they're not ready for the year 7 maths, maybe then just take a step back and spend some time still playing maths games if needs be. And then when you do feel they're ready, then they can move on to the year 7 maths. I think it's definitely about knowing when your child is ready. There's no point pushing them if you clearly know that they're not ready to take that next step and complete the work. So I think it's definitely about knowing your child and ensuring that yes, you've gone to the next level, but they're ready to go to that next level with you, and together you can work to make sure that they're still engaged. Because I do find that a lot of the homeschooling mums, they do find that they said it is easier when the children are younger. As they get older, you do have to get the teenagers to connect and complete work. It does help. The mums have said, like, if they work in a group. Some parents, they're fine and their teenager gets on with it. They're quite autonomous in their learning. But some children do actually benefit from actually working as a group to complete activities. You know, they'll encourage each other, push each other. And I think that is another way that you could make sure that they're still, you know, they're making sure they're still socializing. So that's covered as well, because that is one issue that people always comment on when you say you're a homeschooler. So you've covered socializing, interacting with others and their peers, and then again you're covering that curriculum knowledge that they need to complete. And when they're with their peer groups, they're more inclined to ask their peer groups for help compared to, say, asking their parents, who's also their educator.
That's brilliant. You have said something earlier on. I need to go back to it. I'm not too sure if people know the meaning of the word. You spoke about kinesthetic. Did you say? Yeah, I think it's kinesthetic, you said.
Yeah, kinesthetic.
I was just trying to think which one of the learning style you spoke about. Yeah, you spoke about kinesthetic. Would you like to tell us? I'm not going to say, but you use it. So would you like to tell us what is it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I think that's probably definitely my favorite learning style.
It is.
Because it's hands-on. Like I like to get messy, and that's this hands-on practical learning. And research has shown that children learn best when they're actually doing practical learning. So for example, when I complete science with my daughter, it's just not a case of me getting her to write out a science experiment or even do a science work, but that is so boring and she's not going to take in the learning. But when we did our own volcano, she's made her own like lip glosses, she's made her own like rain cloud. When that practical learning has taken place and she's been able to witness, you know, an experiment, a chemical reaction happening, that's when the true magic of learning has taken place. And then again, we can do afterwards, we can write up what we've done. You know, she can take photographs and then she can order, make sure it's in the, then that's so much learning that's taking place just from one activity. So yeah, kinesthetic learning, I really enjoy it. It's that practical learning, hands-on, so that children, because they take it in more when they're actually doing, when they know that they take more in when they're actually doing the activity. Instead of someone just at the front standing saying, "This is a volcano." This is like, children they're not gonna take that in. But if you get groups of children, you set up each table with the volcano, step by step. You do each of the steps. You watching the volcano erupt as a class, as a group. That is when that practical learning is going to take place for the children, and they're going to remember. They'll be able to tell you next week. They'll be able to go home, tell their parents, "This is what we did today. This is what happened. And this is how a chemical reaction took place." So that's, kinesthetic is definitely one of my favorite forms of learning. And I've seen it in action in so many schools. The school that I did my teacher placement in, they used to have a record of, I think it's called a record of practical learning. And that was when each week the children would do learning either as a group or we used to do it as a whole class. And you would just see the difference compared to when the teacher was at the front talking about a subject. The children used to love and look forward to when it was record of practical learning week. You could just see like lots of them knew, oh, today is Wednesday, this is the day that we're going to actually do something practical. And it makes a huge difference. It definitely does.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much for that, because we learn more by doing. It doesn't matter who it is. We learn more by doing. That's why I always say to people, I'm not a traditional teacher. We just have to be doing. I do a lot in my classroom, although psychology background, but we do a lot in the classroom because I feel that we need to be hands-on. And where possible, I feel that educators need to use all the senses. as I say to my student, I say, in order for you to enjoy learning, you need to use all your senses. Miss, how are we going to taste it? I say, certain subject, you taste it, right? Because students always say to you, but Miss, how are we going to taste it? Okay, if we're looking at social learning theory, how are we going to taste it? I say, well, you visualize and you taste it, you know? So it's like getting them to get into that space of visualizing and making learning come alive. You know,
yes,
I also feel that educators need to be enjoying it.
Oh yes, you know those teachers that are not just there for the money. You know, we've all been there. We've all been there. And I remember that I've learnt the most from those teachers that literally teaching is their life. Like one teacher that I worked with when I think I was working as a teaching assistant, and I loved working with her. She used to be so dynamic when it came to like any lesson. She would just become so theatrical because her background was drama. So any lesson she'd become so theatrical, and she'd make it so fun that the children had no choice but to learn. So I remember when they had to do times tables, and before the previous teacher would say to them, 1 times 4 is, and they used to hate it. But then this teacher, she was like, you know what, today I'm gonna rap. And at first I was like, rap times tables? Oh, this is up. But she did it. And then we had all the children rapping. And then the recall of times tables, it was just amazing. And I just loved her approach. She was always theatrical about any lesson. And that was her every day. I used to say to her, where do you get the energy? But she was like, I just love what I do. And I love when the children are able to connect with the learning. And I just love when I see them have that light bulb moment. So for me, they're the best teachers that I've worked with. You can just see they throw their whole selves into the lesson. The ones that just stand there and talk from the board or just read off from the whiteboard or a PowerPoint they found on Twinkle, those teachers, I'm just like, you really think the children are taking in anything you said? Because I'm sitting there as a teaching assistant, I haven't taken in a single word, and I'm an adult.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I look and I just think, you do know that those children haven't heard a word you said. It does make a difference when the lessons are, you know, entertaining for the children. And even if you don't feel that way, you just have to find a way to put it on. It's like I always get told that I've got my teacher voice and my sing-song voice. And yes, it is annoying, but you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to make any little thing excitement, you know, any little sign you can find, you have to make it fun. You have to, because that's the only way the children are going to connect with you as a teacher and then with the learning. If you're going to be boring sitting there reading the book one day, that the children, they're not hearing you. You've lost them. They're falling asleep. But if you put on the character voices, if you have to get your teaching assistant involved, you dress up, you get a child involved, that makes a huge difference.
Exactly. And it's interesting though, because those are some of the things that parents could actually do at home for homeschooling, because those are, during the pandemic, I had a lot of parents reaching out to me, and those are some of the things I said to them, because I'm not a homeschooler, but at the same time, I know that for me, I always say to students, you know, in terms of teaching, you're an actor on the stage. The students are your audience. So just think, you know, when you go to the theater, you want to have a memorable experience in the theater. So therefore, that's what you want your student to have, a memorable experience. So therefore, you need to look at it, okay, I'm an actor on the stage, and the classroom is your stage. The students are your audience. You need to make sure when they leave your classroom, they're remembering what you taught them. I said to my student, I don't expect you to, there's sometimes you don't have to agree with it. As hell, I want you to understand it and enjoy it. So my duty as a teacher is to make sure it's enjoyable by whatever means necessary. Sometimes I think, oh my goodness, oh my, but sometimes you have no choice because you want to take the children with you. So that's the same advice I gave parents when they're reaching out to me during the pandemic. Oh, I'm having challenges with my student, with my children, etc. I said, chunk up the lesson. Do a 20 minutes. Forget about what the teachers have sent home for you. After every 20 minutes, you have a 5 minutes break. Do something. Make it exciting. Dance around. You know, you guys enjoy going to song. Teaching is supposed to be exciting. Education is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, that's so true. But I just feel that some educators, they become set in their ways and they don't want to change. They just feel like, you know what, this is the way I've always done it. This is where I'm going to continue. So some teachers, it's very, very hard to get them to understand that if you don't make the learning fun, you know, children aren't going to connect. It's like myself as an adult. If I go to training and the trainer's got a dull, monotonous tone, or even if they're just talking at me, I always say to people, I could read from a young age. So if you're going to just read slides, you've lost me. I'm going to be sitting there doodling. I'm going to be thinking about my dinner plans. I'm going to start thinking about all these things, and I'm not in the room. I won't come back to the room until someone says, oh, you know what, the training's done. Then I've left the room. So just similar to how us adults have to connect with the trainer, we need to think of the children, that if we're not making the learning fun, they're not going to connect. They're not going to take it in. Even if you don't want to, because sometimes, I'm not saying it's easy, you might not be feeling 100%, but you just have to find the energy to just make it fun so that they are excited about whatever it is they're learning.
Yep, I so agree with you. It's interesting though, because I think the traditional education system have conditioned our children so much, right? That when a teacher like me go in, that I have the PowerPoint, but I'm not going to read off the PowerPoint, and I'm saying to students that you are not allowed to take notes, right? That's a constant complaint. Every school I work in, I've always been reported to the principal or the headmaster or someone. Oh, because Miss doesn't want us to take notes. No, because when you're taking notes and I'm talking about it, you are taking my notes. I'm going to give you a little while to summarize what you've understood from what I've said to you. So when I'm talking, do not take notes, put your pen down, because understand what I'm saying. If it means I have to repeat myself 10 times, I'm okay with doing that, because when you're writing, you are summarizing. I'm using that from my own experience when I was a student. You sit down, you make pretty notes, you underline it pretty, you take the ruler, nice line underneath it. Do you understand that? No, you don't understand it. The notes is just pretty. And, research have shown that people don't learn like that. So all these nice, pretty notes you underline, it didn't when you leave the classroom, you just close the book. Next day, you pick it up. And that's it. That's some of the things I was saying to my son. I said, no, those things don't work. Forget about taking pile of notes. So that's, for me, homeschooling allow parents to become innovative, but they also need the confidence to do that. How would you give them the confidence to do that? What would you tell them?
I think definitely see what works for your child. So some children, they might not benefit from you really putting on theatrics. But, if you do know that your child does benefit from it, then go all out. Don't feel embarrassed. It's your child, and just think, when they have that light bulb moment, when they connect with whatever topic is that you're doing, then just do whatever you have to do. Just go all out, just so that they can just have that magic moment when it comes to learning. I think definitely, don't feel embarrassed if, you're thinking, oh, I don't want to rap or sing a song or whatever. Just have fun with the learning, and just remember what it's like when you was at school, and think that don't think, parents should ask themselves, what's one of my most memorable lessons from school? And I'm sure it's not going to be that teacher that stood at the front and was really boring. I'm sure it's going to be a lesson that either maybe someone came in and spoke to them about a topic, or maybe someone came in, put on a show, or maybe there was a particular teacher that stood out for them. And they need to remember what it was about that teacher, and then see if there's a way for them to emulate that, and then try and encompass that into their own teaching style. And again, work with your child, find out what they're interested in, because that will make a huge, huge difference when you know how your child learns, and also just what it is that just sparks that interest in them. Because when you're teaching a topic and you know that your child's not interested, you're wasting both your time and your child's. So it would make sense that, say, for example, if you know that your child is interested in dinosaurs, then you know what, go all out, learn everything you can about dinosaurs. Plan a trip to the Natural History Museum. Once you've done that, you can come back home. You can do artwork to learn about and to do dinosaurs. You can start to do go and pretend to dig up, and you can hide a dinosaur egg and pretend that, oh my God, look what we found. Go all out, just because that is when your child's gonna be like, oh wow, we found, yes, we have. Okay, you know, it's not true, but it doesn't matter. Just so that your child connect that learning and think, wow, you know, we've done this topic and look what's happened down. We found a special discovery. Then you can then say, now that we've found the dinosaur egg, the museum wants us to write a special letter because they now want us to see if we can display the dinosaur egg, and we're going to be in charge. And again, there you go. You've got a whole nother host of learning to continue just from one single topic, dinosaurs, whatever the interest is. You can just do so much more and continue to build and build and build. And then once you've exhausted that, then of course, move on to the next topic. But as long as your child is interested, keep it going.
It's interesting. Thanks for that, because it's like I'm sitting there thinking that's what the traditional school doesn't give us. Continuation of a topic. Because you see, because you have all this content, you know, it is thrown at you that you have to do all this content. And I'm saying to my student, one of the things she'll say, oh, but Miss, we haven't covered all of it. Don't worry. I say, I'm sure that you've learned so much out of this lesson. When we continue in this chunking session, you would remember a lot more. So which means that even though you have, you know, you have a whole lot of things to learn from what your previous teacher have done, how much of it have you remembered? Not a lot. Oh, it's like, you know, I was saying earlier on in terms of the PowerPoint. One of my lessons I was, the student said to me, Miss, the other teacher we had, and students love to compare you with other teachers. The other teacher we had, she gave us the PowerPoint, and we write down, we copy everything from the PowerPoint. And I stood there and I busted laughing. Miss, why are you laughing? I said, okay, can you now tell me what you have learned from the PowerPoint that you copied everything from? Come on, tell me. Let's go over it. Just to prove my point. And then look at me. Oh, but I've got it at home. I say, exactly. I say, okay, let's go back to my lesson. Can you remember what we looked at? Yes. Can you remember the video? Exactly. That's my point. Okay, Miss, you have a point. That's it. Because all you did from the PowerPoint was you copied all the notes. You could do that from a textbook. Did you understand it? No, you didn't. So one of the things we need to make sure, it seems like homeschooling does, is make sure that children understand it.
Yes.
Fully before we move on.
Yes, that's another thing. You've definitely got the time to make sure that you're going at your child's pace, because in the classroom, you can't do that. There's so many different children, so many different learning styles. So, you know, we don't go at the children's pace because we can't. As educators, we're very restrained. So, you know, we are quickly moving on. But there's a vast majority of children that probably wouldn't have grasped the concept. But regardless, you have to move on. But whereas when you're homeschooling, you know, you can spend as long as needs be on a particular topic, and that gives your child the time to grasp the concept. And maybe if anything, you can leave it. Say maybe you've worked on it for 3 weeks, you think that's too long, leave it, then move on and do another topic, and then come back to it. And then maybe then your child will be able to connect. Because in between that time, you know, you can still just do little bits here and there. Because for example, I'm thinking of time. My daughter really, really struggled with telling, and she could do digital, but analog, she really struggled. So the first technique I tried was to get her a watch. That didn't make any difference. She still would look at it and would struggle. Then we tried like practical and then playing games, again, struggling. So then I changed it completely, and I thought, okay, let's put that aside. She knows digital very well. We'll just here and there, I'll just make sure, just try and make the link. And then it was when we went out and she would see analog clocks, I would start to like help her to try and recognize. And then slowly she started wearing her watch again. And now she can tell it like a pro. So again, it was because I didn't dwell on it, even though, you know, she did find it difficult. It was good that I didn't dwell on it, that I went at her pace, moved on, and now she's able to do it. And that was something that school had said from, I think it was year 2. They basically just said, oh, she's not getting it, she's never going to get it. But that was their perception, because she had to go at the pace of the other children who grasped it like that. Some children do find time as a very difficult concept. But when you're home educating, that's an example of a topic that you can spend as long as needs be, just to ensure that your child is comfortable. Because some children, they do find it very, very difficult. It doesn't matter how you do it. They just find time quite a difficult concept.
It's interesting. No, thank you for that, because it's a situation where, you know, what going through my head is, okay, you taught your child time, the child didn't get it, you leave it, you teach another topic, and then you go back to it. So therefore, it's like the pressure, sometimes, as we know, the pressure would actually make this child panic, and learning isn't taking place. That's why something I do with my student is when I'm teaching some students something and they don't get it, I say, you know what, just leave it. But miss, I need to know it. No, just leave it, leave it. Let's move on. And then I'm going to throw that in next week to see whether or not you understand it. Because there's sometimes that aha moment doesn't come straight away. And another thing is sometimes, you know, you may not be able to connect with a student. You might be, you know, that student, sometimes I say to them, okay, let's just leave that. You're not getting it. And I've repeated myself several times and you get it angry. Just leave it. Don't get frustrated. Just let's let it go. You know what? I'm going to visit that next week. In the meantime, ask your neighbor next to you to see if they could explain that to you. Because there's sometimes another student is able to explain something better than I can do it. And I hold my hand up. And I said, well, I didn't do it well because I cannot reach every student in the way I teach. The next door neighbor, who is the student next to them, might be able to explain it better than I can. And
no, that is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. It's wonderful when you watch children explain to each other, because they'll use the language that is child-friendly that we wouldn't think to use.
Yes.
And it's just a beautiful moment in a classroom when you see another child, you know, go up to another child, or even if you pair them up and you say, can you explain this to so-and-so? And it's beautiful to watch that, you know, you stood at the front and you're like, oh, they weren't getting it. But then when another child, it's amazing to see that child then like, oh, now I get it. And then again, you can reinforce that. As a teacher, then it's your job to reinforce it and to ensure that they did take it in. So no, it's very, very true. That I think that method is really, really great. Peer teaching is wonderful.
Yeah. And you see, one of the things as educators, we don't have to feel away. I don't feel away. I explain to students that don't understand, maybe it's the way I do it. You know, because one of the greatest learning technique is you teach something to other people, because when you teach something that you don't know, that's how you learn it as well. So it's like you teach it. So you're learning it and you're teaching it at the same time. So it reinforces it. So that's something that, you know, as an educator, it doesn't mean that you're a less educator. You need to be okay. You need to feel vulnerable. You need to realize that, you know, you need to remove the ego from teaching. You need to demonstrate vulnerabilities. Like students say, but miss, you're the teacher. Yes, I'm the teacher, but you know what? I don't have everything in my head. I'm a teacher. I'm also a human being as well. And as a human being, we don't remember everything. We forget some things, you know, even in the classroom, even with any of my subject. You know, when a student might ask a question, I say to them, oh my goodness, I really can't remember, you know, completely failed me. I cannot remember. You know what? We could all have a look at it and reinforce it, and tomorrow we discuss it. I put my hand up. I don't carry a textbook in my head. I don't carry the encyclopedia in my head. So I don't have all the answers.
No, I agree. I think that definitely shows that's a sign of a good teacher when they're able to, you know, put their ego aside and realize that, you know what, I wasn't able to explain that concept, but great, Sarah was.
Yeah.
And take my hat off to Sarah. Definitely,
exactly.
I agree.
Exactly. And, you know, when you connect that to homeschooling, you know, those are some of the things. And it's interesting because I say to students all the time, they are my teacher. And they're thinking, me, it's what you're talking about. Yeah, you are my teacher, because you know what, you teach me some things or too. But miss, you're the teacher. I hear I'm the teacher, but you're also teaching me some other things from you. And I think as educators, whether or not we're homeschooling or in the traditional classroom, we need to be willing to A, be vulnerable, B, to open to learning. Because this pandemic have been an eye-opener for me. My students have taught me a lot of stuff. They have forced me to learn. Oh my goodness. Talk about force me to learn. As I was saying yesterday on the platform, when students are deciding to take control of the lesson because I did not understand, I had to co-host the lesson, etc. You learn quick. Because I'm saying to them, the PowerPoint have gone. And I'm like, the PowerPoint have gone. And they say, miss, because you didn't say that you are the only host of the lesson. Oh, is it? I had so many laughing and so many you know, and then you have all sorts happening. And there was no point in me getting angry. I just had to laugh it out because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So those are some of the things. So you could imagine in terms of homeschooling that you need to make sure that you connect with your children because, you're also learning your child learning style.
Yeah, learning together. It's a beautiful journey. Like, just take your time and, you're learning alongside your child because even though you did go to school and you might have covered certain topics, times have changed, especially how you do certain maths concepts. So again, you will learn alongside your child, and that is just also a beautiful journey that you go on together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is something I need. I think for homeschooling, it needs reinforcing in the sense that the journey that parents are taking with the children, because I do feel that parents feel that they need to be the one knowing a lot more than the children. You don't need to know a lot more. You need to know a bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole thing about it. Because the fact is, you know a bit more because there's sometimes to know a lot more might be challenging. And it's like an educator. I do feel as an educator, yes, there's some students I might, or depending on the level of the students I'm teaching, the maturity of the student, I might know a lot more, but there's sometimes I don't know a lot more, I know a little more than them. So I then have to bring up myself constantly to be always ahead. But it depends, as I said, on the maturity of the children, of the students I'm teaching. In the same way with the parents, because it depends on where the child is coming from. And I love that you say, Alicia, is you're on the journey with that child, because I think that needs to be reinforced a lot.
No, definitely. You are on a journey with your child, and I think you need to remember that. I think when parents might be struggling or they might be finding it difficult, just remember that you're on a journey alongside your child or your children, and don't ever forget that. But it's a beautiful, beautiful journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Another question is, do you feel that homeschooling prepare young people to navigate the real world much more than the traditional school does?
I feel so, in terms of that they're learning so many different life skills that you don't cover in school. In school, a lot of the times we're just taught concepts. We're taught concepts, and we're taught to regurgitate those concepts in SATs and in our GCSEs, whatever exams we have. Whereas there's so many things that we've been able to include in our homeschool schedule. So, for example, we've been able to do financial literacy. We've been able to do, so my daughter knows about money, budgeting. We've been able to talk about cooking, again, key life skills that she's going to need as an adult. We've also been able to look at her mental health. We've talked about mindfulness. And these are concepts that I just feel that in traditional school, we neglect to inform children about, because when they do have to then navigate the real world, it's just a case of, okay, I've gone through the education system. Now I'm going to go to either the next step or I'm going to go for employment. And then, sometimes it might lead to difficulties, especially around our mental health, because we haven't made it a priority. In school, I feel that is something that should be made a priority. Don't wait until the child breaks down to you. Throughout the lessons, try and encompass mindfulness, try and encourage positive talk about their mental health, encourage that we all have mental health. It can be, if you want to put it as simple as good, bad, I don't really like that, but we all have mental health, and some days, are more difficult than others. But if we were able to have tools and resources that teach the children that, it's okay if you're having an off day, that's okay. If you need a moment in the classroom or wherever, we should have a calm zone, or just somewhere where they're able to talk about how they're feeling. And I just feel that that's, where traditional schools lacking. I went to a school, I think it was, early last year. And what I loved was they had a corner where as soon as the child comes in the morning, they had to tell the teacher how they were feeling. And it was lovely. It was anonymous. So the teacher was then able to see, she could see the children that had happily put up that they were happy, great to be here, had breakfast. But then there was some children that weren't feeling so great. But you didn't, it was anonymous where they put their names in a box, and then those children were then taken either by herself or the teaching assistant and then prepared. They were able to speak about what they were dealing with, and then they were ready then for the learning. And that's a concept that we used when we were homeschooling. We had a worry box where my daughter was able to talk about any concerns that she had, whether it was about finding the learning too hard, or just if she was feeling a bit nervous about anything or worried, so that we could talk about it, find a way around it, and then able to approach our learning. So I do feel that there's certain areas that traditional school doesn't help children with, and then it is more difficult for them to navigate particular areas of life, because we do have quite a lot of stressed adults in the workforce. And that's because we're not taught to manage our mental health from an early age. I feel that if we were, it would make a huge difference. And we've still got a long way to go with the stigma with regards to mental health. People just automatically assume that, if you're struggling, then you're weak. It's not as simple as that. It's not as simple. When we've got young children self-harming, having mental breakdowns, like mental health breakdowns, that is a concern. That is a concern, and we shouldn't just wait for them to happen. We should be teaching them that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to, to have the stresses of life impact on you. It's how you deal with it that, what matters, and just reaching out for support.
Yeah, I so agree with you. Because you see, going back to my teaching skills as well, one of the first things I do when I go to the classroom is I play classical music. So when my students come in, they come into classical music, and everything takes about 10 minutes when they come into the classroom. We can listen to classical music is played throughout my lesson anyway. And then we would do a meditation for 5 minutes. And then we'll do a positive quote. I've got a box, I call it my box of quotes. So they will have to take a quote, read, one or two students read out theirs, because it's a different quote, and then we talk about it. And then there is something on the board. You could also pick up when a student isn't having a good day. One of my educators said something to me yesterday, and it was so fantastic that I definitely need to take it, I did say I was going to swipe that. Zuluma, she was an American educator. And one of the things she said to me was, she when she greeted the student is, we've so conditioned to say good morning. Not every child is having a good morning, she said to me. I said to her, oh my goodness, thanks for that, I never thought of it. She said, what she said to them, it's like when I say to my student, good morning, I say, okay, how you guys are feeling? When they don't answer, I say, okay, what's up with you guys? How you guys are feeling? Then you might have some of them would talk, etc. But my first word is, good morning. So therefore she said, no, that's not what she go in and say, oh, how are you guys feeling this morning? I'm thinking, whoa, I only say how they're feeling good this morning when I say good morning, and then no response. Then I said, okay, guys, what's up with you guys? How are you guys feeling? That would be the next sentence. And it's like, whoa, that was a huge aha moment for me yesterday as an educator. And I thought, yes, well, instead of me saying good morning I would start, how are you guys feeling today? Yeah, and it's interesting, something as simple as that, because I never thought of it as, oh, not every child is having a good morning.
No,
we've been conditioned. We've been programmed. Yeah.
No, we have. No, we definitely have.
Anyway, what are the challenges and triumph of home? Sorry, I'm falling over my words here. What are the challenges and triumph of homeschooling? Give me two of each, please.
Challenge. I think one of the very first challenges that we encountered was just knowing my daughter's learning style. Whereas I like to learn a particular way, we don't learn in the same way. So I think that can sometimes be a challenge for parents. Like, if you don't know how your child learns, I think you definitely need to take a step back before doing any sort of learning to find out what's the methods that they enjoy. So that definitely was a challenge for us. And then also, when there's concepts that you're not familiar with yourself, and then you might be worried that, oh my gosh, I've got to then teach my child. So my advice for those, in those circumstances, tell your child, you know what, it's been a long time since mummy's done this maths. You know what, mummy's gonna probably have to take a moment to read up. Maybe we can do it together. We can watch a video together. And you know what, we're gonna learn alongside each other. And then you can do the problem solving. Let's see if we get the same answer. That's the method that we use, because times had changed. So when I did maths and concepts, you do them in different ways. So that was definitely a challenge, like having to learn, especially with maths, different mathematical concepts and how working things out was changed from how I used to do it. Having to learn those methods and then pass them on and teach my daughter. So that's definitely 2 challenges. 2 triumphs, I think it's just that definitely that, the fact that you're able to design your own curriculum, the fact that with your child, you're able to make sure that you're including subjects that that your child enjoys. You're also considering topics that are going to help them with the future, like financial literacy, cooking, life skills, yoga, meditation. You're incorporating all of that in your own timetable that you have designed. And also, I feel that another triumph is when you're able to see your child thrive. You're able to see that moment when like, oh, normally you're not seeing that in the classroom. You're not able to see their books or whatever work's being produced. But when you're able to see a piece of work that your child's produced and completed and feel proud that they've completed, it does make a huge difference. So that's definitely 2 of my triumphs for being a homeschooler.
Okay, thank you. What I really like is when you were talking about the challenge, it's like saying to your child that mommy don't remember this because she learned that a long time. It's like demonstrating vulnerability, and there's no ego there. I just love that. It really is nice, because the more honest we are with our children, our students, the more they understand it, and the more they have respect for you, and the more they start enjoying it. I think that is so very important.
No, it's so true.
Okay, and finally, what 3 tips would you give someone who is considering homeschooling?
Oh, 3 tips.
Yep.
Okay. First tip would be research. So whatever that could be, talking to another family that has been doing it for a long time. That could be going on Facebook, Google, whatever you want to do, going to the library, getting a book out. Definitely research to see if it's the right decision for your family. Another tip I'd say is also just speaking with your child to make sure that it's not just, say, for example, I know sometimes parents have become homeschoolers because something's happened at school, but that's not a reason to become a homeschooler. I think you definitely need to make sure that you know your child inside out, back to front, and that this is what's best for them and what's going to work for your family as well. So definitely speak with your child, find out, what is it, that this is going to be the journey that we're going to go on, and it's journey, and just reassure them it's journey that you're going to go on together. They're not going to be completely on their own, because they are part of the journey as much as you are, and you're having to learn as well. I think definitely you need to bear in mind that your child is part of this journey. And finally, I think just have an open mind. Yes, you've done your research, like I said, to begin with, but have an open mind and know that it's your personal journey with your child, and that no 2 homeschool families are the same. We all do things in a different way. I've got lots of friends who their children thrive on going out on the trips and doing lots of outdoor learning. That's their children in their element. Whereas for me, I like to balance it with a bit of both. I'm not every day trip. Sometimes I do prefer to just sit, go through our timetable, get on with our learning. So my 3 tips, definitely research, make sure you discuss with your child, and have an open mind about homeschooling, and don't think it has to be this way. I have to do it this way once you've done your research. Know that it's up to you, and that, as long as you work with your child, work with the family, within the family, that, it's a beautiful, beautiful journey if you do decide to go on it.
Thank you for that. Wow, that's brilliant. So people, one of the things is, on those sessions we have on a Saturday evening, it will enable you to make a decision as to whether or not homeschooling is for you, and whether or not you feel that homeschool is preparing your child to navigate the real world out there, or whether or not the traditional education is enabling your child to navigate the real world out there. As a parent and as educator, the traditional education does not allow children to navigate the real world, because they don't know how to fill in forms, they don't know about financial education, they don't know anything about mindfulness, they don't even know how to navigate what is bothering them, emotional aspect, they don't know any of that. And it is up to various educators to actually take on board those things to support the students. And some educators who don't have those skills, they don't know what to do. Something as simple as when we went back after the lockdown last September, I asked my student what was lockdown like for them. I spent the whole 90 minutes in every lesson I had talking to students about what it was like for them during the lockdown. And that was my first set of lessons the whole week. I did that with every student I saw. And the result from that was amazing, because there were so many challenges. I had to make so many referrals to external board organization to support the student, because the school did not have enough support. And educators did not ask them those questions. As I said, it varied from educator. The only reason why I did that was I thought it was natural to do, plus my background as a psychologist. So I do feel that, as Alicia said, it's going to be something that is standard in all schools, and it is not standard in all schools. Something basic in terms of children mental health issue and what some of the challenges are. Those are not, there isn't a standardized question or a standardized process or policy in all schools. When a child behaves badly, the child is automatically labeled, sent outside. Next thing, that child might end up in a PRU. There could be other reasons that is causing that behavior. It could be the child has seen a number of things that have taken place in their home life. But has anybody asked that child? No. Instead, that child become labeled as disruptive. Next thing you know, that child end up in a PRU because of the behavior. There's always a causal factor for the behavior. Actually, I could go on and on and on and on those things, because that's something that is really close to my heart in terms of when children behave, when the behavior is not in line with what we expect. There's always a cause or effect. There's cause and effect. What are the causal factor? Anyway, that's not what we're supposed to be talking about, but I end up drifting. Right, I know. That is Debbie with her psychology, the psychologist aspect of Debbie coming out. Yeah, so, so those are the things we're going to be doing on this show in terms of homeschooling, so that it enables you to make a decision. Should, in case we have another lockdown, you've got some idea in terms of supporting your child with the education, and don't bother, as like Alicia said, in terms of this 7 piece of work, that's just a joke. It doesn't really, it's just make sure that you have plenty of work to do, basically. Alicia, what else, anything else you want to say for us to just wrap up the show?
Definitely, if you are considering homeschooling, do make sure that you stay tuned each week, so that you are able to make an informed decision. And please do reach out if anyone would like further assistance with their decisions about home educating.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for that. Only thing left for me to say to you guys, thank you very much for listening if you're listening on Facebook. And this is going to be available on our YouTube channel, so that you could actually have a look at it on YouTube, and it'll always be there. something that you could go back to and have a look at what we talk about in terms of homeschooling. And I'll be on again tomorrow. I can remember the topic of this. Oh yes, tomorrow we'll be looking at, I know. Tomorrow we'll be looking at empowerment, and the topic is sorry. Why do we say sorry? And it's the power of sorry. The power of sorry. Sorry is such a powerful, powerful word. So join me tomorrow with one of my other co-hosts, where we'll be discussing the power of sorry. And I'll be coming on my platform because next week I have a master course running from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, a 3-day master course, looking at self-awareness, confidence, and self-care. So next week I'll be doing a 3-day master course, a free 3-day master course, Tuesday, Wednesday. Did I say Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Sorry, show me Tuesday, because Tuesday I've got my mentoring group, you guys. So it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Sorry, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Tuesday I've already got my group I'm dealing with the 100. Right. Take care, everybody. Good evening, good night. Good morning where you are. Take care. Stay blessed and tune in. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
You did.